The rain hammered against the windows of the old Victorian house on Maple Street as Theodore Blackwood sat alone in his study, staring at the wedding photograph on his desk. 3 years had passed since pneumonia claimed his beloved wife Catherine, yet her smile still seemed to light up the darkest corners of his grief-stricken heart. What he didn't know was that in just 5 minutes, a knock at his door would change everything, bringing into his life a mysterious, young girl whose destiny would intertwine with his in ways he could never imagine. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The storm that October evening in 1952 was unlike anything Millbrook had seen in decades. Theodore Blackwood, a successful textile merchant in his late 40s, had just finished reviewing the day's ledgers when the desperate knocking began. At first, he thought it might be the wind rattling the front door, but the persistent, rhythmic sound told him otherwise. Theodore set down his reading glasses and made his way through the dimly lit hallway, his footsteps echoing on the polished hardwood floors. The knocking grew more urgent. When he opened the heavy oak door, a gust of cold rain swept into the foyer, and there before him stood the most pitiful sight he had ever encountered. A girl, no more than 8 years old, stood shivering on his doorstep. Her clothes were little more than tattered rags, a threadbare brown dress that hung loosely on her tiny frame, holes worn through the fabric at the knees and elbows. Her dark hair was matted against her pale face, and her bare feet were blue with cold. Most striking of all were her eyes, large, green, and filled with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. "Please, sir," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. "I have nowhere else to go." Theodore stood frozen for a moment, his mind racing. In all his years living in this quiet New England town, nothing like this had ever happened. The girl swayed slightly, and he realized she was on the verge of collapse. "Good heavens, child, coming out of this weather," he said, stepping aside and ushering her into the warmth of his home. "You'll catch your death out there." The girl hesitated at the threshold, her eyes darting around the elegant entryway with its crystal chandelier and ornate wallpaper. Everything about Theodore's home spoke of comfort and prosperity, from the Persian rugs beneath her muddy feet to the oil paintings adorning the walls. "I don't want to dirty your beautiful house, sir," she said, looking down at her soaked and filthy appearance. Theodore's heart clenched at her words. Here was a child who had clearly known hardship beyond her years, yet she still possessed such consideration for others. It reminded him of something Catherine would have said, always thinking of others before herself. "Nonsense," Theodore replied firmly. "Houses can be cleaned. You, my dear, need immediate attention." He led her to the sitting room, where a fire crackled warmly in the stone fireplace. The girl's eyes widened as she took in the mahogany furniture, the leather-bound books lining the shelves, and the family photographs scattered throughout the room. She had never seen such luxury. "What's your name, child?" Theodore asked gently, wrapping a wool throw around her trembling shoulders. "Luna, sir." "Luna Mitchell," she replied, pulling the blanket closer. "I'm sorry to bother you. I saw the light in your window and thought, I hoped." "You hoped correctly," Theodore assured her. "Now, when did you last have a proper meal?" Luna's stomach answered before she could, growling loudly in the quiet room. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "Yesterday morning, I think. Maybe the day before." "Time gets fuzzy when you're walking so much." Theodore excused himself and hurried to the kitchen, his mind spinning with questions. Where had this child come from? Where were her parents? How long had she been wandering alone? As he prepared a simple meal of soup and bread, he found himself thinking of Catherine and how she would have handled this situation. She had always wanted children, but Providence had never blessed them with any. Perhaps this was fate's way of bringing meaning back into his hollow existence. When he returned with the tray, Luna had moved closer to the fire, though she sat perched. on the edge of the sofa as if ready to flee at any moment. Her green eyes followed his every movement with a mixture of gratitude and wariness. "Here we are," Theodore said, setting the tray on the coffee table. "Nothing fancy, but it's warm and filling." Luna stared at the food for a moment before looking up at him. "Why are you being so kind to me? You don't even know me." The question caught Theodore off guard. Why was he helping her? Perhaps it was because he recognized something in her eyes, the same resilience he had seen in Catherine during her final days, or maybe it was simply because turning away a child in need went against every moral fiber in his being. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply. "Now eat before it gets cold." As Luna ate, Theodore studied her more carefully. Despite her ragged appearance, there was something refined about her mannerisms. She held her spoon properly and chewed with her mouth closed. Someone had taught her proper etiquette at some point in her young life. "Luna," he said carefully, "where did you come from? Do you have family somewhere who might be worried about you?" The girl's hand paused halfway to her mouth, and her expression darkened. For a moment, Theodore thought she might not answer, but then she set down her spoon and met his gaze. "I lived at the Riverside Children's Home about 60 miles east of here," she began, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. "The matron there, Mrs. Hartwell, she wasn't kind to us children, especially not to me." Theodore leaned forward, encouraging her to continue. "Mrs. Hartwell said I was too willful, too smart for my own good. She'd make me scrub floors until my hands bled, or lock me in the cellar when I asked too many questions about my parents. Last week, she told me I was being sent to work for a family in the city, but I overheard her talking to the man who came to collect me. They weren't talking about housework." The implication in Luna's words made Theodore's blood run cold. Even in 1952, there were still those who would exploit vulnerable children, and it seemed Luna had been wise enough to recognize the danger. "So you ran away," Theodore concluded. Luna nodded. "I waited until everyone was asleep, then climbed out through the laundry room window. I've been walking for 6 days, sleeping wherever I can find shelter. I was hoping to reach the city and find honest work, but the storm caught me." Theodore was quiet for a long moment, processing everything she had told him. This child had shown remarkable courage and intelligence in escaping a dangerous situation, but she was still just a little girl who needed protection and care. "Well," he said finally, "you're safe now. The storm should pass by morning, and then we'll figure out what to do next." Luna's eyes filled with tears, though she tried to blink them away. "You mean I can stay? Just for tonight?" "Of course you can stay," Theodore replied. "In fact, I insist upon it." That night, Theodore prepared the guest room for Luna, the same room Catherine had always hoped would one day belong to a child of their own. As he placed fresh linens on the bed and set out clean towels, he found himself wondering if Catherine was somehow watching over them. Both. Luna appeared in the doorway, still wrapped in the wool throw. She had washed her face and hands, revealing features that were delicate and intelligent. There was something almost aristocratic about her bone structure, despite her humble circumstances. "Mr. Blackwood," she said hesitantly, "I want you to know that I'm not looking for charity. If you let me stay, I'll work hard to earn my keep. I can cook and clean and mend clothes. I learn quickly." Theodore smiled at her earnestness. "We'll discuss all of that tomorrow, Luna. For tonight, just rest." As he turned to leave, Luna's voice stopped him. "Mr. Blackwood? Thank you. You're the first person in a very long time who's shown me real kindness." Theodore felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Sleep well, child." The next morning dawned bright and clear, the storm having washed the world clean. Theodore woke earlier than usual, momentarily forgetting about his unexpected houseguest until he heard the sound of movement from the kitchen below. He dressed quickly and made his way downstairs, following the aroma of fresh coffee and something that smelled remarkably like his wife's famous blueberry pancakes. He found Luna standing at the stove, expertly flipping pancakes with a concentration that was almost comical on her young face. She had somehow found Catherine's old apron and had tied it around her waist, though it still hung nearly to her ankles. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwood," she said without turning around. "I hope you don't mind. I found some ingredients and thought I'd make breakfast as a small thank you." Theodore was amazed. "Where did you learn to cook like that?" "My mother taught me before she died," Luna replied matter-of-factly. "I was only 5 then, but I remembered. And some of the older girls at the orphanage showed me other things when Mrs. Hartwell wasn't watching." She plated the pancakes with the same care Catherine used to take, arranging them just so and adding a small pat of butter that melted perfectly on top. When she handed him the plate, Theodore noticed that her hands, though clean, bore the faint scars of hard labor, evidence of the difficult life she had already endured. They ate in comfortable silence, Theodore marveling at both the quality of the meal and the quiet dignity of the child sitting across from him. Luna ate slowly and deliberately, savoring each bite as if she couldn't quite believe the food was real. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Luna," Theodore said finally, "we need to discuss your situation. The authorities will need to be notified that you're safe." Fear flashed across Luna's features. "You're going to send me back?" "Absolutely not," Theodore said firmly. "But there are proper procedures that must be followed. I'll need to speak with the county about your legal status and what options are available." Over the following days, Theodore made numerous phone calls and visits to various government offices. What he discovered about the Riverside Children's Home confirmed his worst fears. There had been multiple complaints about Mrs. Hartwell's treatment of the children, and an investigation was already underway. Luna's escape had actually prompted authorities to take a closer look at the institution. More importantly, Theodore learned that Luna's situation was more complex than it initially appeared. Her full name was Luna Elizabeth Mitchell, and she was the daughter of James and Margaret Mitchell, who had died in a car accident 3 years prior. What shocked Theodore was the discovery that James Mitchell had been a distant cousin of his late wife Catherine, a connection that seemed almost too coincidental to believe. "So you see," Luna said when Theodore shared this information with her, "maybe I was meant to find you." Theodore had been thinking the same thing. Over the past week, Luna had brought life back into his empty house in ways he hadn't expected. She sang while she worked, asked thoughtful questions about his business, and had even convinced him to teach her chess in the evenings. Her quick wit and natural intelligence reminded him constantly of Catherine, who had possessed the same curious mind and gentle spirit. The legal proceedings moved more smoothly than Theodore had dared hope. With no living relatives to claim her, and given the circumstances of her escape from the troubled orphanage, the county was more than willing to approve Theodore's petition for guardianship. Judge Morrison, who had known both Theodore and Catherine for years, expedited the paperwork. "That little girl is lucky to have found you, Theodore," Judge Morrison said as he signed the final documents. "Catherine would have loved her." Theodore knew the judge was right. As weeks turned into months, Luna blossomed under his care. She proved to be an exceptional student when Theodore enrolled her in Millbrook Elementary, quickly catching up on the education she had missed during her time at the orphanage. Her teachers were amazed by her quick grasp of mathematics and her natural talent for literature. At home, Luna transformed the house from a mausoleum of memories into a living, breathing home once again. She tended Catherine's neglected garden, bringing the roses and peonies back to life with patient care. She organized Theodore's chaotic study, creating a system that actually made sense. Most remarkably, she had an uncanny ability to sense when Theodore was lost in grief, and would appear with a cup of tea and a gentle conversation that somehow always managed to lift his spirits. But it was the small, unexpected moments that truly captured Theodore's heart. The way Luna would scrunch her nose when concentrating on homework. Her delighted laughter when she discovered the library Theodore had shown her in the house's third floor. The serious expression she wore when helping him with his business correspondence, as if she were his most trusted advisor rather than a 9-year-old girl. One evening in December, as they sat by the fire working on a jigsaw puzzle, Luna looked up at Theodore with those penetrating green eyes. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, "may I ask you something personal?" Theodore smiled. Luna had a way of making even the most serious conversations feel natural. "Of course, my dear. Do you ever think Mrs. Blackwood would have liked me?" The question caught Theodore completely off guard. He set down the puzzle piece he had been examining and really looked at Luna, this remarkable child who had wandered into his life, like a gift from Providence itself. "Luna," he said softly, "Catherine would have absolutely adored you. In fact, I think she would have seen in you everything she hoped for in a daughter." Luna's face lit up with a smile that could have powered the entire house. "Really, really," Theodore confirmed, "and I think she would have wanted me to ask you something." Luna tilted her head, curious. Theodore took a deep breath, feeling nervous in a way he hadn't since he'd proposed to Catherine 25 years earlier. "How would you feel about making this arrangement permanent? About becoming my daughter officially?" For a moment, Luna was completely still. Then tears began to stream down her cheeks, not tears of sadness, but of pure joy. "You mean it?" she whispered. "You'd want me to be your real daughter?" "I can't imagine wanting anything more," Theodore replied, and he meant every word. Adoption was finalized on a snowy day in February. Luna Elizabeth Mitchell became Luna Elizabeth Blackwood, and Theodore officially became the father he had always longed to be. The transformation in both of them was remarkable. Theodore rediscovered his capacity for joy and purpose, while Luna flourished under the stability and love she had never known. As Luna grew, her intelligence and character continued to amaze everyone who met her. She excelled in school, earning the respect of her teachers and the friendship of her classmates, despite her unusual background. More importantly, she developed into a young woman of remarkable compassion and strength. Theodore watched with pride as Luna navigated the social complexities of small-town life. Some of the more prestigious families in Millbrook initially viewed her with suspicion. After all, she was just an orphan that Theodore had taken in. But Luna's natural grace and intelligence quickly won over even the most skeptical critics. Mrs. Pemberton, the banker's wife and unofficial social queen of Millbrook, had initially been among Luna's harshest critics. She changed her tune completely after Luna helped organize a charity drive for the new orphanage that had replaced the corrupt Riverside facility. "That girl has more class in her little finger than half the so-called society ladies in this town," Mrs. Pemberton declared at the annual church bazaar. Theodore Blackwood raised her right. But it wasn't just Luna's social successes that made Theodore proud. It was the quiet moments that revealed her true character. Like when she spent her own allowance money to buy books for the struggling Henderson family after their father lost his job at the mill. Or when she sat for hours reading to elderly Mrs. Cooper next door, whose eyesight was failing. Theodore began to understand that Luna's difficult early years hadn't broken her spirit. They had forged it into something stronger and more beautiful than he could have imagined. She possessed an empathy and wisdom that came from having experienced real hardship, combined with an optimism that seemed to spring from some inexhaustible well within her soul. By the time Luna reached her teenage years, she had grown into a striking young woman. Her once pale complexion had taken on a healthy glow, and her dark hair now fell in gentle waves past her shoulders. But it was her eyes that truly captivated people. Those same green eyes that had first appealed to Theodore's compassion now sparkled with intelligence, humor, and kindness. Theodore found himself constantly amazed by the person Luna was becoming. She approached life with a curiosity and enthusiasm that reminded him of Catherine, but she also possessed a strength and independence that was uniquely her own. She could discuss literature with the college professors who sometimes visited Theodore's store, then turn around and help Mrs. Murphy from the grocery store figure out her accounting problems. The people of Millbrook began to forget that Luna had ever been anything other than Theodore Blackwood's beloved daughter. She became an integral part of the community, organizing social events, tutoring younger children, and generally making everyone around her feel a little bit better about the world. But perhaps most remarkably, Luna had brought Theodore back to life in ways he hadn't thought possible. The man who had spent 3 years existing in a fog of grief and loneliness now found himself laughing daily, planning for the future, and rediscovering his faith in human goodness. Luna had given him purpose again, not just as her father, but as a better version of himself. One spring evening, as they worked together in Catherine's garden, now thriving under Luna's careful attention, Theodore realized that his life had become fuller and richer than it had ever been, even during his happiest days with Catherine. It wasn't that he loved Catherine any less, but rather that Luna had taught him that the human heart's capacity for love was limitless. "Papa," Luna said, using the name she had started calling him after the adoption, "do you think Mama Catherine would be happy with how the garden looks this year?" Theodore looked around at the explosion of color surrounding them, the roses climbing the trellis, the delphiniums reaching toward the sky, the herb garden Luna had added near the kitchen window. Everything was more beautiful than it had ever been under Catherine's care. "I think," he said, putting his arm around Luna's shoulders, "that she would be amazed by what you've accomplished. And I think she would be just as proud of the remarkable young woman you've become as I am." Luna leaned against him, and Theodore felt a profound sense of completeness. He had saved Luna from a life of hardship and uncertainty, but in truth, she had saved him from a life of loneliness and despair. They had found in each other exactly what they had both been missing. As the sun set over Millbrook that evening, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, neither Theodore nor Luna could have imagined the extraordinary future that lay ahead of them. They were simply a father and daughter, content in their love for each other, and their shared hope for tomorrow. The foundation of their relationship, built on mutual respect, genuine affection, and unshakable trust, would prove strong enough to weather any storm. And though neither of them knew it yet, the greatest test of that bond was still years away, waiting in a future where Luna would face choices that would define not just her own destiny, but the legacy of the love that had brought them together. On that stormy October night, 8 years had passed since that stormy October night, and Luna Elizabeth Blackwood had grown into a woman of 17 who turned heads wherever she went in Millbrook. But it wasn't just her striking beauty that captivated people. It was the confident grace with which she moved through the world, the sharp intellect that sparkled in her conversations, and the genuine warmth she showed to everyone from the mayor's wife to the street sweeper. Theodore often found himself marveling at the transformation. The frightened, ragged child who had appeared at his door had become the unofficial heart of Millbrook's social scene, organizing charity events with the efficiency of a seasoned diplomat and managing his increasingly complex business affairs with an acumen that impressed even his most experienced competitors. On this particular morning, in June 1960, Luna stood in Theodore's textile shop, negotiating with Marcus Sullivan, a wool supplier from Boston who had driven down specifically to meet the young woman he'd heard so much about. "Miss Blackwood," Sullivan said, clearly flustered, "I've been in this business for 30 years, and I've never had someone your age demonstrate such understanding of market fluctuations and quality standards." Luna smiled politely as she examined a bolt of fine merino wool. "Mr. Sullivan, age is irrelevant when it comes to recognizing value. This wool is exceptional, but your pricing reflects last season's market conditions. Cotton prices have dropped significantly, which means consumers will be more price-sensitive about luxury items like wool garments. Theodore watched from behind the counter, hiding his amusement as the seasoned businessman found himself outmaneuvered by a 17-year-old girl. Sullivan ended up accepting Luna's counteroffer, a price that was fair but considerably lower than his original asking price. After Sullivan left, shaking his head in bewilderment, Theodore approached Luna with a grin. "Where on earth did you learn to negotiate like that?" Luna laughed, the sound filling the shop with warmth. "I listened to your business calls for years, Papa. Plus, I've been reading the trade journals you subscribe to. It's not that complicated. Once you understand the underlying economics." Theodore shook his head in wonder. Luna had never ceased to surprise him. Just last month, she had suggested a new inventory system that increased their efficiency by 30%. The month before that, she had identified a potential expansion opportunity that Theodore's own accountant had missed. "You know, Theodore," said thoughtfully, "you're probably ready to handle the Portland expansion we've been discussing." Luna's eyes lit up. For months, they had been considering opening a second location in the larger city 2 hours north. It would be a significant investment, but the market research Luna had conducted suggested strong potential for success. "Really? You'd trust me with something that important?" "Luna, I'd trust you with my life," Theodore replied without hesitation. "You've already proven yourself capable of handling far more responsibility than most people twice your age." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Mrs. Patricia Whitman, the mayor's wife and one of Luna's closest adult friends in town. Patricia burst through the shop door with uncharacteristic excitement. "Luna, darling, you'll never guess what's happened," Patricia exclaimed, her usual composed demeanor completely abandoned. Luna raised an eyebrow. "Given your current state, Patricia, I'd say either the president is coming to Millbrook or your son has finally gotten engaged." "Better," Patricia practically shouted. "The Ashford family is moving back to town, and they're bringing their son William with them." Theodore noticed Luna's expression shift slightly, though she maintained her polite smile. The Ashford name carried significant weight in New England society: old money, prestigious connections, and a reputation for producing successful businessmen and politicians. "How wonderful for them," Luna said diplomatically. "I'm sure the community will welcome them back." But Patricia wasn't finished. "Luna, William Ashford is 22, graduated from Harvard last year, and according to my sources, he's absolutely brilliant. His family has been looking for the right community to establish their new textile manufacturing operation, and Millbrook fits their requirements perfectly." Theodore felt a strange chill run down his spine. He glanced at Luna, who was now examining a bolt of silk with perhaps more attention than it warranted. "More importantly," Patricia continued, oblivious to the undercurrents in the room, "his mother specifically asked about the eligible young ladies in town. Your name was the first one I mentioned." Luna finally looked up from the silk. "Patricia, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I'm hardly in the market for matchmaking. I have far too much to focus on with the business expansion." "Nonsense," Patricia waved her hand dismissively. "A brilliant young woman like you deserves a brilliant young man. The Ashfords are hosting a welcome dinner next Saturday, and I've already told them you'll be attending." After Patricia left, the shop fell into an unusual silence. Theodore busied himself with paperwork while Luna returned to her inventory calculations, but he could sense the tension radiating from her. "You don't have to go to dinner if you don't want to," he said finally. Luna looked up, her expression thoughtful. "It's not that I don't want to meet new people, Papa. It's just that Patricia has this way of treating me like I'm some prize to be won rather than a person with my own thoughts and ambitions." Theodore nodded, understanding completely. Luna had grown up without the typical social pressures that shaped most young women's lives. She had never been taught that her primary value lay in making a good marriage. Instead, she had been encouraged to develop her mind and pursue her interests. "Whatever you decide," Theodore said, "you have my complete support." The Ashford welcome dinner became the talk of Millbrook for weeks before it even occurred. The family had purchased the old Brennan estate on the hill overlooking town and had spent considerable money restoring it to its former grandeur. Invitations were coveted, and those who received them spent days planning their outfits and preparing conversation topics. Luna, meanwhile, seemed largely indifferent to the social implications of the event. She spent the week before the dinner focused on finalizing the details for the Portland expansion, reviewing lease agreements, and meeting with potential local partners. "You're remarkably calm for someone who's about to meet Millbrook's most eligible bachelor," Theodore observed on Friday evening as Luna worked on correspondence at the kitchen table. Luna looked up with an amused expression. "Papa, I've survived abandonment, abuse, and homelessness before I was 9 years old. I think I can handle dinner with some textile manufacturers." Her matter-of-fact response reminded Theodore once again of the extraordinary resilience his daughter possessed. Luna approached challenges with a practical confidence that never failed to impress him. Saturday evening arrived with perfect weather, warm but not humid, with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of honeysuckle through the air. Luna had chosen a simple but elegant navy blue dress that Catherine's seamstress had altered to fit her perfectly. Her dark hair was swept up in a sophisticated style that made her look older than her 17 years. As they walked up the curved driveway to the Ashford estate, Theodore felt a surge of pride. Luna moved with the natural poise of someone completely comfortable in her own skin, neither intimidated by the grandeur of their surroundings nor trying too hard to impress anyone. The Ashford house was indeed impressive, a sprawling colonial, with perfectly manicured gardens and enough space to accommodate the 50 guests who had been invited. Uniformed servants circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres, while a string quartet played classical music on the terrace. Charles Ashford, the family patriarch, greeted them warmly at the door. He was a distinguished man in his 50s with silver hair and the kind of confident bearing that comes from generations of success. "Theodore, so good to see you again," Charles said, shaking Theodore's hand enthusiastically. "And this must be the famous Luna we've heard so much about." Luna smiled politely and offered her hand. "Mr. Ashford, thank you so much for including us in your celebration." "The pleasure is entirely ours," Charles replied, clearly charmed. "William is particularly eager to meet you. He's been asking about the textile business in this area, and I understand you've become quite the expert." Before Luna could respond, a young man appeared at Charles's shoulder. William Ashford was undeniably handsome, tall and lean with dark blonde hair and intelligent blue eyes. He wore his expensive suit with the casual confidence of someone who had never doubted his place in the world. "Father, you're monopolizing our guests," William said with an easy smile. "Miss Blackwood, I presume? I've heard remarkable things about your business acumen." Luna shook his offered hand, her expression politely interested, but not overly impressed. "Mr. Ashford, I understand you're considering establishing manufacturing operations in our area." "Among other things," William replied, his gaze lingering on Luna's face. "Though I'm finding the local attractions more compelling than I initially anticipated." Theodore watched the interaction with careful attention. William was clearly intelligent and well-educated, but there was something in his manner, a subtle assumption of entitlement, that made Theodore slightly uncomfortable. Luna, however, seemed completely unaffected by William's obvious charm. "How fascinating," Luna said with just a hint of irony in her voice. "I'd love to hear more about your business plans. The economic impact on our community would be quite significant." As the evening progressed, Theodore observed Luna navigating the social dynamics with remarkable skill. She conversed knowledgeably about literature with the college professor's wife, discussed agricultural policy with the local farmers, and even held her own in a heated debate about international trade with several of the older businessmen. William Ashford, meanwhile, seemed increasingly determined to capture Luna's attention. He regaled her with stories of his Harvard experiences, his travels in Europe, and his family's business empire. To his credit, he also listened when Luna spoke, and Theodore could see genuine respect growing in his expression as he realized that Luna was far more than just a pretty face. "Miss Blackwood," William said during a lull in the conversation, "I'd be honored if you'd allow me to show you the gardens. The moonlight makes them particularly beautiful this evening." Luna glanced at Theodore, who nodded slightly. "That sounds lovely, Mr. Ashford." As they stepped onto the moonlit terrace, Theodore found himself in conversation with Eleanor Ashford, William's mother. She was an elegant woman in her late 40s, with the kind of refined beauty that comes from good breeding and careful maintenance. "Your daughter is extraordinary, Mr. Blackwood," Eleanor said, watching Luna and William through the French doors. "William has met countless young ladies in Boston and New York, but I've never seen him so immediately captivated." Theodore felt a complex mix of emotions at her words. Pride in Luna's accomplishments, certainly, but also a protective concern about William's intentions. "Luna is indeed special," Theodore replied carefully. "She's worked very hard to become the person she is today." Eleanor nodded approvingly. "I can tell. There's something about her bearing, her confidence. It's not the superficial poise that money can buy. It's something deeper." Outside on the terrace, Luna was discovering that William Ashford was more complex than his privileged background might suggest. Yes, he had grown up with every advantage, but he also possessed genuine curiosity about the world and a surprising awareness of social issues. "I have to admit," William said as they paused beside a fountain surrounded by white roses, "I expected Millbrook to be a charming but rather simple place. I didn't expect to find someone who could challenge my assumptions about economic policy." Luna laughed softly. "And I didn't expect someone from your background to be genuinely interested in hearing those challenges." "My background?" William raised an eyebrow. "You mean my privileged upbringing?" "I mean your experience of never having to question whether there would be food on the table or a roof over your head," Luna replied without malice. "It shapes perspective in ways that most people don't realize." William was quiet for a moment, considering her words. "You're right, of course. I've never had to worry about basic survival. But I hope that doesn't disqualify me from understanding its importance." Luna studied his face in the moonlight, seeing something she hadn't expected: genuine humility. "Not disqualify, no. But it does mean you have to work harder to understand experiences different from your own." "Then teach me," William said simply. "I'd like to understand your perspective." It was the beginning of a friendship that would surprise everyone in Millbrook, including Luna herself. Over the following months, William proved to be far more than the entitled rich boy she had initially assumed him to be. He was genuinely interested in the textile business and spent hours in Theodore's shop, learning about the practical aspects of running a small business. More importantly, he seemed genuinely interested in Luna as a person rather than as a potential conquest. He listened when she spoke about her plans for the Portland expansion, offered thoughtful suggestions for the charity work she organized, and even volunteered to help with the literacy program she had started for adult workers at the mill. Theodore watched their growing friendship with mixed feelings. He was pleased to see Luna forming connections with people her own age, and William's obvious respect for her intelligence and independence was encouraging. But he also couldn't shake the feeling that complications lay ahead. The textile business that had brought William's family to Millbrook was indeed significant. Ashford Manufacturing represented potential prosperity for the entire community, new jobs, increased commerce, and the kind of economic stability that small towns desperately needed. William's presence in Luna's life was becoming intertwined with the economic future of everyone Theodore cared about. By autumn, William had become a regular fixture in the Blackwood household. He joined them for Sunday dinners, helped Luna with her college preparation studies, and even convinced Theodore to teach him chess. Theodore had to admit that the young man was growing on him. William's initial arrogance had given way to genuine curiosity about life outside his privileged bubble. One evening in October, exactly 9 years after Luna had first appeared at Theodore's door, William approached Theodore privately in his study. "Mr. Blackwood," William began, his usual confidence replaced by nervous energy, "I'd like to speak with you about something important." Theodore set down his newspaper, already suspecting what was coming. "Of course, William. Please sit down." William perched on the edge of the leather chair across from Theodore's desk, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "Sir, I know this might seem presumptuous, given that I've only known your family for a few months, but I've fallen completely in love with Luna." Theodore remained silent, allowing William to continue. "I know she's young, and I know my family's expectations might seem overwhelming, but I believe Luna and I could build something extraordinary together. She challenges me to be better than I ever thought possible, and I hope I do the same for her." "And what does Luna think about all this?" Theodore asked quietly. William's confidence faltered slightly. "I haven't spoken to her yet. I wanted your blessing first. I know how much your opinion means to her." Theodore leaned back in his chair, studying the young man before him. William's feelings appeared genuine, and his respect for both Luna and Theodore himself seemed sincere. But Theodore also understood the complexities that a union between Luna and William would entail. "William," Theodore said finally, "Luna has faced more challenges in her 17 years than most people face in a lifetime. She's learned to be independent, to trust her own judgment, and to value herself for more than her ability to make a good marriage." William nodded earnestly. "I know, sir. It's one of the things I most admire about her." "Then you'll understand why I won't give you my blessing unless Luna herself wants it," Theodore continued. "She's not property to be given away. She's a remarkable young woman who deserves to make her own choices about her future." "Of course," William agreed immediately. "I wouldn't want it any other way." Theodore studied William for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "In that case, you have my permission to speak with her. But William, if she says no, you accept that answer with grace and continue to treat her with the same respect you've shown thus far." "Absolutely, sir. Thank you." The next evening, William took Luna for a walk along the river that ran behind the Blackwood property. It was a path they had walked many times before, but tonight felt different, charged with an electricity that had nothing to do with the approaching storm clouds. "Luna," William began as they paused on the old stone bridge, "these past few months have been the most meaningful of my life." Luna turned to face him, her green eyes reflecting the last rays of sunset. "They've been wonderful, William. Your friendship has meant a great deal to me." "That's just it," William said, taking her hands in his. "I don't want just friendship anymore. I love you, Luna. I love your brilliant mind, your compassionate heart, and the way you make everyone around you want to be better. I love how you challenge me and how you never let me take the easy way out of difficult conversations." Luna was quiet for a long moment, her gaze searching his face. "William, what you're talking about, it would change everything. Your family has certain expectations, certain standards. I'm not exactly what they had in mind for the heir to the Ashford fortune." "My family will learn to love you just as I have," William insisted. "And even if they don't, it doesn't matter. You matter. We matter." Luna pulled her hands free and walked to the edge of the bridge, staring down at the water rushing beneath. "Them. You say that now, but you haven't really thought about what it would mean." I'm not some society debutante who comes with a dowry and the right connections. I'm an orphan from a failed children's home who happened to get lucky. William moved to stand beside her. You're Luna Elizabeth Blackwood, one of the most extraordinary people I've ever met. Your past doesn't define your worth. Doesn't it? Luna asked quietly. William, I care about you deeply, but I've worked too hard to build my independence to risk losing it for anyone, even you. William felt his heart sink, but he forced himself to listen rather than argue. I've seen what happens to women who define themselves entirely through their relationships with men, Luna continued. I won't become someone who exists solely as Mrs. William Ashford, no matter how much I might care for the man behind that name. Then don't, William said with sudden clarity. Marry me, but stay exactly who you are. Build your business empire. Change the world. I don't want to own you, Luna. I want to be your partner in whatever dreams you're brave enough to chase. Luna turned to look at him, surprised by the passion in his voice. I've spent my whole life surrounded by people who told me what I should want and who I should become, William continued. But you're the first person who's ever made me question those assumptions. You've shown me that there are more important things than social status and family expectations. If you marry me, it won't be because it's what's expected. It will be because we choose each other every single day. The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable, and Luna felt her carefully constructed defenses beginning to waver. She had spent so many years protecting herself from disappointment that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to trust someone completely. William, she said softly, if I say yes, and I'm not saying I am, but if I did, you need to understand that I would never be content to simply play the role of the dutiful wife. I have ambitions of my own. Name them, William challenged. Whatever they are, I'll find a way to support them. Luna took a deep breath. I want to expand Papa's business into a regional operation. I want to establish fair labor practices that become the industry standard. I want to create opportunities for other young women to gain business experience. And someday, I want to establish a foundation that helps children in situations like the one I escaped from. William listened to each item on her list with growing admiration. Luna, those aren't obstacles to our future together. They're the foundation of it. I can't think of anything I'd rather spend my life supporting. Luna studied his face in the fading light, looking for any sign of insincerity or hidden reservation. She found none. What she saw instead was a young man who had somehow managed to see past his own privilege to recognize something valuable in a different kind of life. Ask me again in 6 months, Luna said finally. William's face fell slightly. 6 months? I need to see how you handle the reality of what a relationship with me would actually mean, Luna explained. Your family won't approve initially. The social pressures will be significant. Some people in both our circles will question your judgment. I need to know that you can weather that storm without resenting me for causing it. William reached for her hands again, and this time she didn't pull away. Luna, I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Then you won't mind proving it, Luna replied with a small smile. The next 6 months tested both Luna and William in ways neither had anticipated. The Ashford family's reaction to William's obvious infatuation was about what Luna had expected, polite on the surface but clearly concerned underneath. Eleanor Ashford invited Luna to tea several times, ostensibly to get to know her better, but actually to probe for weaknesses or signs of gold-digging behavior. She found neither. Luna's intelligence, composure, and genuine disinterest in the Ashford family wealth left Eleanor both impressed and slightly frustrated. She's not what I expected, Eleanor confided to her husband after one particularly lengthy tea session. I was prepared to dislike a calculating social climber, but Luna Blackwood is anything but calculating. If anything, she seems almost indifferent to our family's status. Charles Ashford had reached a similar conclusion after several business discussions with Luna. She understands our industry better than some of my senior managers, he admitted. And her ideas for the Portland expansion are genuinely innovative. Meanwhile, William was discovering what it meant to love someone who refused to be anything less than his equal. Luna didn't defer to his opinions simply because he was a man or because his family had money. She challenged his assumptions, corrected his mistakes, and expected him to keep up with her intellectually. Far from finding this intimidating, William found it exhilarating. For the first time in his life, he was with someone who saw him as a person rather than as a symbol of wealth and status. Luna's love, when she finally offered it, would be based on who he actually was rather than what he represented. The breakthrough came in February, during a particularly challenging negotiation with a supplier who was trying to take advantage of what he assumed was Luna's inexperience. William watched as Luna systematically dismantled the man's arguments with a combination of sharp logic and steely determination that left the supplier agreeing to terms more favorable than Theodore had dared hope for. "Remind me never to try to cheat you in a business deal," William said afterward, only half joking. Luna grinned. "Too late for that. I already negotiated you down to helping with inventory every Saturday morning. And I wouldn't have it any other way," William replied, realizing that he meant it completely. That evening, as they walked along their familiar path by the river, William tried once more. "Luna, it's been 6 months. I've watched you build something extraordinary with your father's business. I've seen you stand up to people who underestimated you and win the respect of people who initially dismissed you. I've fallen more in love with you every single day. Will you marry me?" Luna stopped walking and turned to face him fully. In the moonlight, her expression was serious but no longer guarded. "Yes," she said simply, "but on one condition." William felt his heart leap. "Anything. We get married here in Millbrook, in the small church where Papa and Mama Catherine were married. Not some elaborate society wedding in Boston that's more about your family status than our actual relationship." William pulled her into his arms, spinning her around as she laughed. "Luna Blackwood, you have yourself a deal." As they kissed under the starlit sky, neither of them could have predicted the incredible twist that fate had in store, a discovery that would transform their understanding of Luna's past and reveal connections that stretched back generations, ultimately leading to a moment when Luna would wear a wedding dress that had been waiting for her long before she ever knocked on Theodore Blackwood's door. The engagement announcement appeared in the Millbrook Gazette on a crisp March morning in 1961, sending ripples of excitement through the small community. "Local business heiress to wed Boston textile magnate's son," read the headline, though Luna had specifically requested they avoid the word heiress. She preferred entrepreneur, but newspaper editors rarely listened to such preferences. Theodore sat at his kitchen table, reading the announcement for the 3rd time while Luna prepared breakfast. The smell of coffee and fresh biscuits filled the air, but he found himself struggling with emotions he hadn't expected to feel. "Having second thoughts about giving your blessing?" Luna asked, not turning from the stove but clearly sensing his mood. "Not about William," Theodore replied honestly. "About losing you." Luna set down her wooden spoon and moved to sit across from him. At 18, she had developed an uncanny ability to read the emotions he tried to hide. "Papa, you're not losing me. You're gaining a son-in-law who thinks you hung the moon and a daughter-in-law who will still argue with you about inventory management every Tuesday morning." Theodore smiled despite his melancholy. "It's not the same, and we both know it." "No," Luna agreed. "It's different. But different doesn't have to mean worse." Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the front door. Theodore glanced at the clock. 8 in the morning was early for visitors, even in a town like Millbrook where social formality was often relaxed. Luna answered the door to find Mrs. Abernathy, the elderly woman who managed the church's administrative affairs. She was holding a large, wrapped package and wearing an expression of barely contained excitement. "Luna, dear, I have something that I think you and your father need to see," Mrs. Abernathy announced, bustling into the house without waiting for an invitation. Theodore joined them in the parlor as Mrs. Abernathy carefully unwrapped her mysterious package. Inside was a wooden chest, perhaps 2 feet long and beautifully carved with intricate rose patterns along its edges. "This belonged to Catherine," Mrs. Abernathy explained, her voice soft with reverence. "She left it with me before she died, with very specific instructions about when it should be opened." Theodore stared at the chest, completely bewildered. "Catherine never mentioned anything about this to me. She asked me to give it to you when your daughter got engaged," Mrs. Abernathy continued, her eyes twinkling with unshed tears. "She was very specific about that, not when you remarried, but when your daughter found love." Luna felt a chill run down her spine. "Mrs. Abernathy, Catherine died 3 years before I came to live here. How could she have known?" "That's what makes this so extraordinary, dear," the elderly woman replied. "Catherine always said she had a feeling that Theodore would find his way to fatherhood, even if it wasn't in the way they had originally planned." With trembling hands, Theodore lifted the ornate brass latch and opened the chest. Inside, wrapped in layers of tissue paper that had yellowed with age, was the most beautiful wedding dress Luna had ever seen. The gown was made of ivory silk that seemed to shimmer even in the dim parlor light. The bodice was fitted with delicate pearl buttons running down the back, and the skirt flowed in elegant layers that would create a small train. Most remarkable were the sleeves, long and fitted with intricate lacework that extended into fingerless gloves connected by tiny pearl loops. But what truly took Luna's breath away was how perfectly the dress seemed sized for her, even folded. In the chest, she could tell it would fit her as if it had been made specifically for her measurements. Theodore reached beneath the dress and pulled out an envelope bearing his name in Catherine's familiar handwriting. His hands shook as he opened it and read aloud, "My dearest Theodore, if you are reading this, then our daughter has found love, and my heart is full of joy, even though I cannot be there to share this moment with you both." "Yes," I said, "our daughter. I have always known that love would find a way to bring a child into your life, even if I could not be the one to give her to you. This dress has been in my family for 4 generations. My great-grandmother wore it when she married a man who saved her from poverty. My grandmother wore it when she married for love rather than convenience, scandalizing her family. My mother wore it when she chose hope over fear. I wore it when I married you, the greatest blessing of my life. Now it waits for the daughter we never had, but always hoped for. I don't know her name or how she will come to us, but I know she will be extraordinary. I know she will be loved. And I know that when she wears this dress, she will carry with her the love of all the women who wore it before her. Theodore, please tell our daughter that she is not inheriting a stranger's dress. She is claiming her birthright as a woman who chose love over fear, just as all the women in our family have done before her. With all my love and hope for your future. Happiness, Catherine." By the time Theodore finished reading, both he and Luna were crying openly. Mrs. Abernathy dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, clearly moved by the scene she had helped orchestrate. "There's more," Mrs. Abernathy said gently, reaching back into the chest. She pulled out a smaller box containing a delicate necklace of pearls and emeralds, and beneath that, a pair of ivory silk shoes that looked as if they had never been worn. "Catherine asked me to tell you," Mrs. Abernathy continued, addressing Luna directly, "that the emeralds will bring out your eyes, just as they brought out hers." Luna reached out with trembling fingers to touch the dress. The silk was cool and smooth, preserved perfectly despite its age. As her fingers traced the intricate lacework, she felt an overwhelming sense of connection, not just to Catherine, but to all the women who had worn this dress before her. "Papa," Luna whispered, "how is this possible? The measurements, the timing, Everything. Quotes Theodore shook his head in wonder. I don't know, sweetheart. But Catherine always said she believed in miracles. Over the following weeks, the discovery of Catherine's dress became the talk of Millbrook. The story was so remarkable that it transcended the usual boundaries of social class and religious denomination. Even the most skeptical residents found themselves moved by the idea that love could somehow transcend death to touch the living. William was initially overwhelmed by the significance of the dress and what it represented. Luna, are you sure you want to wear something with so much emotional weight? We could find you something new, something that's just yours. Luna smiled at his concern. William, don't you see? This dress is mine. Catherine knew somehow that I would need it, that I would be here to wear it. It's not a burden, it's a blessing. The wedding planning that followed was unlike anything Millbrook had ever seen. Luna insisted on keeping the ceremony simple, but the story of the dress had captured the imagination of people far beyond their small town. Reporters from Boston and New York called, wanting to write about the miracle dress and the orphan girl who had found not just a family, but a legacy. Luna handled the media attention with her characteristic grace, giving interviews that focused on the importance of family, both the one you're born into and the one you choose. She spoke eloquently about Theodore's role in her life and about Catherine's continued presence in their family, even years after her death. This dress represents something beautiful about human connection, Luna told a reporter from the Boston Globe. It shows that love doesn't end with death. It finds new ways to manifest itself in the world. Catherine's love for Theodore extended to include me, a child she never met, but somehow knew would need her guidance. The Ashford family, initially skeptical about the media attention, found themselves caught up in the romance of the story. Eleanor Ashford, who had been planning an elaborate society wedding, gracefully deferred to Luna's wishes for a simple ceremony in Millbrook's small church. After all, Eleanor told her Boston friends, how can you compete with destiny? As the wedding date approached, Luna threw herself into finalizing the Portland expansion with an intensity that worried both Theodore and William. She worked 18-hour days, negotiating contracts, interviewing potential managers, and overseeing the renovation of their new location. She's nervous, Theodore explained to William one evening as they watched Luna pore over architectural plans at the kitchen table. This business expansion represents her independence, her proof that she can succeed on her own merits. She needs to know it's secure before she commits to marriage. William nodded, understanding more than Theodore realized. She wants to come to me as an equal partner, not as someone who needs rescuing. Exactly, Theodore confirmed. Luna has never been interested in being saved. She's always been focused on saving herself. 3 weeks before the wedding, Luna received an unexpected visitor at the textile shop. A well-dressed woman in her 50s entered during the afternoon lull, looking around with obvious curiosity at the displays of fabric and sewing notions. Miss Blackwood? The woman inquired. My name is Margaret Winters. I was hoping I might speak with you privately. Luna looked up from the inventory sheets she had been reviewing. Something about the woman's bearing suggested this wasn't a typical customer visit. Of course, Mrs. Winters. How can I help you? Margaret Winters hesitated for a moment, then reached into her purse and pulled out a faded photograph. I believe you knew my sister. Luna took the photograph and felt her world shift beneath her feet. The image showed a young woman who looked remarkably like Luna herself. The same dark hair, the same green eyes, the same delicate bone structure. This is my sister Sarah, Margaret continued. Sarah Mitchell. She died in a car accident 12 years ago, along with her husband James. Luna's hands trembled as she held the photograph. Sarah Mitchell was my mother? She was, Margaret confirmed. And I've been looking for you ever since you disappeared from that horrible children's home. The conversation that followed changed everything Luna thought she knew about her past. Margaret Winters, Margaret Mitchell before her marriage, had been frantically searching for Luna since learning about the conditions at the Riverside Children's Home. She had hired private investigators, contacted government agencies, and followed every lead, but Luna had vanished completely after her escape. "I only found you because of the newspaper articles about your engagement," Margaret explained. "When I saw your photograph and read your story, I knew immediately that you were Sarah's daughter." Luna learned that her parents had been traveling to visit Margaret when the accident occurred. They had been planning to ask Margaret and her husband to serve as Luna's guardians in case anything ever happened to them. The irony was heartbreaking. If they had made the trip one day earlier, Luna might have grown up in a loving home instead of the nightmare of the orphanage. "Why didn't you try to claim me immediately after the accident?" Luna asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer. Margaret's face crumpled with guilt. "We were living in California then, and James had left you with some family friends while they made the trip. By the time we learned about the accident and flew back east, the authorities had already placed you in the orphanage system. When we tried to claim you, we were told that the paperwork had been processed and that it would take months to reverse. We were devastated. And then? We moved back east to be closer to where you were placed, but when we finally got through the legal red tape, we discovered that you had run away. The orphanage claimed they had no idea where you had gone." Luna processed this information, feeling a strange mixture of joy and sadness. Joy at learning she had a family who had wanted her, sadness at all the years they had lost. "Mrs. Winters, Margaret, why are you telling me this now? Why not contact me privately instead of coming to my shop?" Margaret smiled for the first time since entering the store. "Because I want to be part of your wedding, if you'll have me. I want to walk you down the aisle alongside Theodore. Sarah would want that." The revelation of Luna's surviving family added another layer of complexity to an already emotional situation. Theodore was initially concerned that Margaret's appearance might somehow diminish his role in Luna's life, but Luna quickly put those fears to rest. "Papa, you raised me. You loved me when I was unlovable, and you gave me a chance when no one else would. Margaret is my aunt by blood, but you are my father by choice, and choice is always stronger than accident." Theodore felt tears sting his eyes at her words. Even now, Luna had the ability to say exactly what he needed to hear. The final weeks before the wedding passed in a blur of activity. Margaret proved to be a delightful addition to the family, sharing stories about Luna's parents and filling in gaps in Luna's understanding of her heritage. She also brought photographs and mementos that helped Luna feel connected to the family she had lost so young. "Your mother was exactly like you," Margaret told Luna one afternoon as they looked through old photo albums. "Brilliant, stubborn, and absolutely fearless when it came to standing up for what she believed in." "What did she believe in?" Luna asked. "Justice," Margaret replied without hesitation. "Your parents met at a rally for workers' rights. Your father was a lawyer who specialized in labor disputes, and your mother was a teacher who volunteered with literacy programs. They believed that everyone deserved a fair chance to build a good life." Luna smiled, understanding for the first time where her passion for fair business practices had originated. It wasn't just her response to her difficult childhood. It was part of her genetic inheritance. The night before the wedding, Luna sat in her childhood bedroom, surrounded by the women who had shaped her life. Margaret was there, sharing stories about Sarah. Mrs. Abernathy had come to help with final alterations to Catherine's dress. Even Eleanor Ashford had joined them, having evolved from skeptical future mother-in-law to genuine friend and supporter. "Tomorrow," Eleanor said, "you're going to be the most beautiful bride Millbrook has ever seen. More importantly," Margaret added, "you're going to be marrying a man who truly sees and appreciates who you are." Mrs. Abernathy, now in her 80s but still sharp as a tack, had the final word. And you'll be wearing a dress that carries the love of generations of strong women. Catherine would be so proud. As the other women prepared to leave, Luna found herself alone with the wedding dress, which hung from the wardrobe door like a shimmering promise. She reached out to touch the delicate lace sleeves, imagining Catherine's hands working on the same fabric, preparing for her own wedding day decades earlier. "Thank you," Luna whispered to the empty room, not sure if she was addressing Catherine, her mother Sarah, or the universe itself. "Thank you for bringing me home." Outside her window, a gentle rain began to fall, not the fierce storm that had brought her to Theodore's door 10 years earlier, but a soft cleansing shower that seemed to wash away the last of her fears about the future. Tomorrow she would marry William Ashford, but tonight she was simply Luna Elizabeth Blackwood, the little girl who had been saved by love and was now ready to build a love of her own. In the morning, she would put on Catherine's dress and walk down the aisle of the small church where Theodore and Catherine had pledged their love to each other. She would carry with her the blessings of both her birth family and her chosen family, the wisdom she had gained from hardship, and the hope she had learned from Theodore's unwavering faith in her potential. The orphan girl in rags had become a woman of substance, and tomorrow she would wear a dress that had been waiting for her long before she ever knew she needed it. The circle of love that had begun with Catherine's leap of faith was about to expand once again, creating new possibilities for joy and connection that even Catherine's remarkable intuition could never have fully imagined. As Luna finally drifted off to sleep, the rain gentle against her window, she dreamed of tomorrow and all the tomorrows that would follow, each one a gift, each one a choice, each one an opportunity to continue the legacy of love that had brought her to this moment. Morning of Luna's wedding dawned with the kind of perfect spring weather that seems orchestrated by destiny itself. Sunlight streamed through the lace curtains of Luna's bedroom, casting delicate patterns on the walls as she woke to the sound of birds singing in Catherine's garden below. For a moment, Luna lay still, absorbing the significance of the day. In 6 hours she would become Mrs. William Ashford, but more importantly, she would be claiming her place in a legacy of love that stretched back generations. The thought both thrilled and humbled her. A soft knock interrupted her reverie. "Luna, darling, are you awake?" Margaret's voice called from the hallway. "Come in," Luna replied, sitting up and pushing her dark hair away from her face. Margaret entered carrying a breakfast tray laden with fresh strawberries, warm croissants, and coffee. "I thought you might be too nervous to eat, but you'll need your strength for today." Luna accepted the tray gratefully, realizing she was indeed nervous, but it was a different kind of nervousness than she had expected. She wasn't worried about marrying William. She was anxious about living up to the remarkable women who had worn Catherine's dress before her. "Margaret," Luna said as her aunt settled into the window seat, "tell me about my great-great-grandmother, the first woman to wear this dress." Margaret's eyes lit up with the pleasure of sharing family history. "Ah, Isabella. She was extraordinary. Born into poverty in Ireland during the famine years, she came to America with nothing but determination and a fierce intelligence. She met your great-great-grandfather Jonathan when she was working as a seamstress in Boston." "How did they meet?" "Jonathan owned a small textile business, remarkably similar to what you and Theodore have built here. Isabella was doing piecework for him, sewing in her tiny apartment above a bakery. One day, Jonathan discovered that she had been not just completing the work he gave her, but improving upon his designs." Luna leaned forward, captivated by the parallel to her own story. Instead of being angry that she had overstepped her bounds, Jonathan was impressed. He offered her a partnership in the business, which was scandalous at the time. A working-class Irish girl becoming a business partner to an established merchant. Society was horrified. But they fell in love, Luna guessed. They did, though. It took them 3 years to admit it. Isabella was determined to prove she was worthy of respect as a businesswoman before she would consider romance. She transformed Jonathan's modest operation into one of Boston's most successful textile companies. Luna smiled, seeing the echoes of her own insistence on establishing her independence before committing to marriage. When they finally wed, Isabella commissioned this dress from the finest seamstress she could find. She wanted something that would be beautiful enough for any society wedding, but practical enough to be preserved and passed down. She believed that someday her descendants would need a reminder that love and success were possible, no matter how humble their beginnings. And each generation has worn it. Each generation, Margaret confirmed. Your great-grandmother Eleanor wore it when she married for love instead of money, shocking her family by choosing a poor but brilliant inventor over a wealthy boor. Your grandmother Rose wore it during the Depression, when marrying your grandfather was seen as economic suicide, but turned out to be the smartest decision of her life. Luna touched the emerald necklace that lay on her dressing table, imagining the strong women who had worn it before her. And my mother? Margaret's expression grew soft with memory. Sarah wore it when she married your father in 1940. It was a small ceremony because of the war, but Sarah said the dress made her feel connected to all the brave women in our family who had chosen love over fear. She sounds remarkable. She was. And Catherine was too, from everything I've learned about her since arriving here. The letter she left, the timing of everything. It's as if she somehow knew that the dress would continue its journey with you. Their intimate conversation was interrupted by a commotion downstairs. They could hear Theodore's voice, unusually animated, and what sounded like multiple people arriving at once. The florists must be here, Luna said, rising to look out the window. But instead of delivery trucks, she saw several familiar cars. In the driveway, including one she didn't recognize, Margaret joined her at the window. That's Judge Morrison's car, and isn't that the mayor? Luna, what's happening? Before Luna could respond, Theodore's voice boomed up the stairs. Luna, Margaret, you need to come down here immediately. Luna threw on her robe and hurried downstairs, Margaret close behind. In the parlor, she found Theodore standing with Judge Morrison, Mayor Whitman, and a distinguished-looking stranger in an expensive suit. Luna, Theodore said, his face flushed with excitement. This is Mr. Harrison Fletcher from the Fletcher Foundation in Boston. He has some rather extraordinary news. Mr. Fletcher stepped forward, extending his hand to Luna. Miss Blackwood, I've been trying to reach you for weeks. We've been conducting research into historical textile businesses in New England, and we've discovered something remarkable about your family's connection to the industry. Luna shook his hand, bewildered. I'm sorry, Mr. Fletcher, but I'm not sure what connection you mean. The Mitchell family textile business, Fletcher explained. Your great-great-grandmother Isabella Mitchell's company in Boston. It evolved into what is now Mitchell and Associates, one of the largest textile manufacturers in the country. Luna felt the room spin slightly. That's impossible. My family lost everything. I grew up in an orphanage. Judge Morrison stepped forward with a thick folder of documents. Luna, what Mr. Fletcher has discovered is that your great-grandmother Isabella was remarkably forward-thinking. She established a trust fund that was designed to support her descendants, but it could only be activated when certain conditions were met. What conditions? Luna asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer. Mr. Fletcher opened his briefcase and pulled out a legal document that looked older than anything Luna had ever seen. According to the terms Isabella established, the trust could only be accessed by a female descendant who had demonstrated independence in business, who had overcome significant hardship, and who was about to enter into marriage for love rather than financial security. Theodore laughed, the sound filled with amazement. Luna, you've fulfilled every single requirement. The trust has been accumulating value for over 70 years, Mr. Fletcher continued. With compound interest and wise investments, it's now worth approximately $200,000. Luna sank into the nearest chair, overwhelmed. $200,000 in 1961 was an enormous sum, enough to expand the textile business beyond anything she had dreamed possible, enough to establish the foundation for helping disadvantaged children she had always wanted to create. "There's more," Mayor Whitman said, clearly excited to be part of such an extraordinary revelation. "Mr. Fletcher has also discovered that your great-grandmother Isabella owned property in Portland, the exact building you've been negotiating to lease for your expansion. The building you've been trying to lease," Mr. Fletcher clarified, "has been owned by the Mitchell Trust for 40 years. As the trust beneficiary, you now own it outright." Margaret clasped her hands together, tears streaming down her face. Isabella's final gift to her family. She somehow knew that someday one of her descendants would need exactly these resources. Luna looked around the room at all the faces beaming at her. Theodore glowing with pride. Judge Morrison grinning like he'd just witnessed the greatest legal vindication of his career. Mayor Whitman already calculating the economic impact on Millbrook's growth. "I don't understand," Luna said finally. "How is any of this possible? The timing, the conditions, the fact that I ended up here in Millbrook instead of anywhere else?" Mr. Fletcher smiled. "Miss Blackwood, I've been a lawyer for 30 years. And I've learned that sometimes the most extraordinary coincidences are simply life's way of proving that we're all more connected than we realize." The next few hours passed in a blur of legal documents, phone calls, and increasingly frantic wedding preparations. Luna signed papers establishing her as the sole beneficiary of the Mitchell Trust, while simultaneously trying on Catherine's dress for final adjustments. Mrs. Abernathy, who had arrived to help with the wedding preparations, took the remarkable turn of events in stride. "Well, of course Isabella's trust would activate today," she said matter-of-factly as she adjusted the dress's train. "The dress has been waiting for exactly this moment." By afternoon, word of Luna's inheritance had spread throughout Millbrook, adding another layer of excitement to what was already being called the wedding of the century. The small church was packed with well-wishers and people who couldn't fit. Inside lined the street to catch a glimpse of the bride, who had gone from orphan to heiress in a single morning. William, waiting at the altar in his black morning coat, was struggling to process everything that had happened. When Luna had called to tell him about the inheritance, he had been struck not by the money itself, but by what it represented. Final proof that Luna was destined for extraordinary things. "Nervous?" asked his best man and college roommate, David Patterson. "Not about marrying Luna," William replied. "About being worthy of someone whose life seems to be guided by miracles." At the Blackwood house, Luna stood before her bedroom mirror in Catherine's wedding dress, finally understanding why it had fit her so perfectly. The dress hadn't been altered for her measurements. It had been made for women like her, women who carried themselves with the quiet confidence that comes from surviving adversity. The ivory silk fell in elegant lines from her waist. The pearl buttons gleamed against the fabric, and the emerald necklace brought out the green in her eyes exactly as Catherine had predicted. But what truly transformed Luna was the expression on her face, a serene joy that spoke of someone who had finally found her place in the world. "You look exactly like your mother did on her wedding day," Margaret said softly, adjusting Luna's veil. Another family heirloom that had belonged to Isabella. Theodore appeared in the doorway, resplendent in his formal suit, but struggling to maintain his composure. "Luna, my dear, you are absolutely radiant." "Papa," Luna said, reaching for his hands, "I want you to know that nothing that happened today changes anything between us. You will always be my father." Theodore squeezed her hands, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "And you will always be my greatest blessing." The church bells began to ring, signaling that it was time for the ceremony to begin. Luna took a deep breath, smoothed her skirts, and prepared to walk down the aisle toward her future. The small church was transformed with white roses and greenery from Catherine's garden. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns on the walls and floor. Every pew was filled with faces Luna recognized, shopkeepers and farmers, teachers and merchants, all the people who had watched her grow from a frightened child into the confident woman she had become. As the wedding march began, Luna appeared at the back of the church with both Theodore and Margaret flanking her. The collective gasp from the congregation was audible. Luna looked like something from a fairy tale, but a fairy tale grounded in real love and genuine character. William felt his breath catch as Luna began her walk down the aisle. The woman approaching him was the same person he had fallen in love with over the past year, but something about seeing her in Catherine's dress, surrounded by the love of an entire community, made him understand for the first time the full magnitude of what they were beginning together. Luna's eyes never left William's face as she walked toward him. She saw in his expression not just love, but a recognition of the journey that had brought her to this moment. This wasn't just a marriage ceremony. It was a celebration of everything she had overcome and everything she was becoming. When they reached the altar, Theodore kissed Luna's cheek and placed her hand in William's. "Take care of her," he whispered, though everyone in the small church could hear. "I will," William promised, and Luna could hear in his voice that he understood the sacred nature of the trust being placed in him. Reverend Matthews, who had baptized Luna and confirmed her in the same church, began the ceremony with words that seemed to acknowledge the miraculous nature of the day. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of two souls who have found in each other not just love, but destiny itself. Luna and William, your journey to this altar has been marked by extraordinary circumstances that remind us all that love truly can conquer any obstacle." As the familiar words of the marriage ceremony filled the air, Luna felt the presence of all the women who had worn this dress before her. She could almost hear Isabella's Irish accent blessing her courage, Eleanor's laughter celebrating her independence, Rosa's gentle voice encouraging her dreams, and her mother Sarah's loving whisper reminding her that some loves are worth waiting for. When Reverend Matthews asked, "William, do you take Luna to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, as long as you both shall live?" William's response rang out clear and strong. "I do, with all my heart and soul." And when the same question was posed to Luna, her answer carried the conviction of someone who had learned that the greatest leaps of faith often lead to the greatest rewards. "I do, completely and forever." As William placed the wedding ring on Luna's finger, a simple gold band that had belonged to his grandmother, Luna felt the final piece of her new life click into place. She was no longer Luna Mitchell, the abandoned orphan, or even Luna Blackwood, the grateful adopted daughter. She was Luna Ashford, a woman who had claimed her heritage and chosen her destiny. "By the power vested in me by the state of Maine, I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Matthews announced. "William, you may kiss your bride." As William lifted Luna's veil and leaned down to kiss her, the entire church erupted in applause and cheers. But for Luna, the noise faded to a whisper as she focused on this perfect moment, the culmination of a journey that had begun on a stormy night 10 years earlier, when a desperate child had knocked on the door of a grieving widower. Walking back down the aisle as Mr. and Mrs. William Ashford, Luna caught sight of the empty pew that had been reserved in memory of Catherine. For just a moment, she could have sworn she saw a figure sitting there, a woman with kind eyes and an expression of infinite love and approval. Outside the church, as rice and rose petals rained down on the happy couple, Luna paused to look back at the building where her new life had officially begun. The same church where Theodore and Catherine had pledged their love, where Luna had been baptized into her chosen family, and where she had just committed to building a family of her Own. Any regrets? William asked, following her gaze. Luna smiled, her face radiant with joy and certainty. Only that it took us so long to get here. As they climbed into the decorated carriage that would take them to the reception, Luna clutched the bouquet Margaret had made from flowers in Catherine's garden. Everything had come full circle, the love that had saved her, as a child, was now launching her into a future filled with infinite possibilities. The orphan girl in rags had become a bride in silk, but more importantly, she had become a woman who understood that the greatest inheritance isn't money or property. It's the love we choose to pass on to others. And as Luna and William drove away toward their new life together, that love seemed to shimmer in the air around them, like a blessing from all the generations who had worn the dress before her, ensuring that the legacy would continue for generations. Yet to come, the reception at the Millbrook Town Hall was unlike anything the small community had ever witnessed. What had begun as plans for a modest celebration had transformed into something approaching a festival, with people from 3 counties arriving to be part of what local newspapers were already calling the wedding that proved miracles still happen. Luna and William stood in the receiving line, greeting an endless stream of well-wishers who seemed equally enchanted by the romance of their story and amazed by the morning's revelations about Luna's inheritance. But for Luna, the most meaningful moments came from the quiet conversations with people who had known her throughout her journey in Millbrook. Mrs. Henderson, the grocer's wife who had always slipped Luna an extra apple when she was younger, pressed a small wrapped package into her hands. "Just a little something for your new home, dear. You've brought such joy to our community." Mr. Patterson, the elderly banker who had initially been skeptical of a young woman's ability to understand business, shook her hand with genuine respect. "Miss Luna, Mrs. Ashford, I owe you an apology. You've taught this old man that wisdom has nothing to do with age." But it was the arrival of an unexpected guest that truly captured Luna's attention. As the afternoon wore on, a frail elderly woman appeared at the edge of the crowd, supported by a younger woman who was clearly her caregiver. "Mrs. Ashford," the caregiver said, approaching Luna hesitantly, "this is Mrs. Rose Hartwell. She insisted on coming today, despite her condition." Luna's blood ran cold at the name. Rose Hartwell, the daughter of the cruel matron from the Riverside Children's Home, where Luna had suffered so much abuse. Luna's instinct was to turn away, but something in the elderly woman's expression stopped her. "Mrs. Mitchell, I mean." "Mrs. Ashford," Rose Hartwell said, her voice barely a whisper, "I needed to see you today. I needed to apologize." Luna studied the woman's face, seeing genuine remorse and shame in her weathered features. "Mrs. Hartwell, what are you talking about?" "My mother," Rose continued, tears beginning to flow down her cheeks. "What she did to you and the other children. I didn't know the extent of it until after she died. When we were going through her papers, we found records, photographs, evidence of things that ... I can't even speak of them." William moved closer to Luna, sensing her tension. But Luna held up a hand, indicating she wanted to hear what Rose had to say. "I spent years trying to find you, trying to find all the children who had been hurt under my mother's care. I wanted to make amends somehow, but you had disappeared so completely. When I saw your engagement announcement in the Boston papers, I knew I had to come." Rose reached into her small handbag and pulled out an envelope. "This is for you. It's not nearly enough to make up for what you endured, but it's everything I inherited from my mother's estate. I couldn't bear to keep money that came from the suffering of innocent children." Luna took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a cashier's check for $15,000, a substantial sum that represented years of government payments for caring for orphan children. "Mrs. Hartwell," Luna said softly, "I appreciate this gesture more than you know. But I want you to understand something. I'm not the same frightened child who ran away from your mother's institution. What I endured there made me stronger. And it led me to the family I was meant to have. Rose looked up at Luna with amazement. You're not angry? I was angry for many years, Luna admitted. But anger is a burden I chose to put down. Your mother's cruelty taught me to recognize genuine kindness when I found it. In a strange way, her darkness helped me appreciate the light. Luna handed the check back to Rose. Take this money and do something good with it. Start a program to help children who are aging out of the foster system. Make sure no child goes through what I went through. Rose Hartwell clutched the check to her chest, sobbing with relief and gratitude. You're an extraordinary woman, Mrs. Ashford. Your parents would be so proud. As Rose was helped away by her caregiver, William put his arm around Luna's shoulders. That was remarkable, he said quietly. I don't think I could have been so gracious. Forgiveness isn't about them, Luna replied, watching Rose disappear into the crowd. It's about freeing yourself to move forward. The afternoon celebration continued with dancing, speeches, and an abundance of food that reflected the community's determination to honor Luna and William's special day. Theodore gave a toast that brought tears to every eye in the room, speaking about the night Luna had appeared at his door and how she had transformed not just his life, but the entire community. To Luna, Theodore said, raising his glass, who taught us all that family isn't just about blood. It's about the love we choose to give and receive every day. Margaret followed with her own toast, sharing stories about Luna's mother and the remarkable lineage of strong women Luna represented. To the continuation of a legacy, Margaret said, and to the knowledge that love truly is stronger than any obstacle. As the sun began to set, Luna and William prepared to leave for their honeymoon, a 2-week trip to Ireland that would allow Luna to see the country where her great-great-grandmother Isabella had been born. But before they departed, Luna had one final piece of business to attend to. She found Theodore sitting quietly on the front steps of the town hall, watching the last guests mill about in the fading light. His formal jacket was draped over his arm, and his tie was loosened. He looked more relaxed than Luna had seen him in months. "Papa," Luna said, settling beside him on the steps. "Are you all right?" Theodore smiled, though she could see the melancholy in his eyes. "I'm wonderful, sweetheart. Today has been perfect. I just needed a moment to process everything that's happened." "The inheritance changes things," Luna said. "We need to talk about what it means for the business, for your future." "Luna," Theodore interrupted gently, "today is your wedding day. Business discussions can wait until you return from your honeymoon." "No, they can't," Luna said firmly. "Because what I want to propose affects how we structure things going forward." Theodore turned to look at her, curious about her serious tone. "I want to make you a full partner in the expanded operation," Luna continued. "Equal ownership, equal decision-making authority. The inheritance gives us the capital to build something extraordinary, but I don't want to build it alone." Theodore stared at her, speechless. "Luna, that's incredibly generous, but the money is yours. You've earned the right to control your own destiny. Don't you see, Papa? You are my destiny. Everything I've accomplished has been because of the foundation you gave me. I don't want to honor that legacy by leaving you behind. I want to honor it by building something together that we can eventually pass on to the next generation." Theodore felt tears welling in his eyes. "The next generation?" Luna smiled mysteriously. "William and I have talked about children, about creating a family that combines the best of both our backgrounds. Someday, I hope our children will work in the business we build together, carrying forward everything you've taught me. And if those children need extra guidance," Theodore said, his voice thick with emotion, "they'll have the best grandfather they could ask for." Luna leaned against his shoulder, feeling the same sense of safety and belonging she had experienced on that first night, when he had wrapped her in a warm blanket and offered her soup. They'll have the same grandfather who saved their mother and gave her a chance to become everything she was meant to be. As the evening stars began to appear overhead, William approached them, having finished loading their luggage into the car. That would take them to the train station. "Ready for our adventure, Mrs. Ashford?" he asked, offering Luna his hand. Luna stood and smoothed her traveling dress, a simple blue ensemble that was practical but elegant. She had carefully packed Catherine's wedding dress in tissue paper, planning to preserve it for the daughter she hoped to have someday. "More than ready," she replied, but she turned back to Theodore one final time. "Papa, while we're gone, I want you to start looking at properties for our new headquarters. Something big enough for the vision we discussed, manufacturing, retail, and space for the foundation I want to establish." Theodore nodded, already excited about the possibilities. "Any particular requirements?" "Just one," Luna said with a grin. "Make sure it has a garden. A place where we can grow things and remember that the most beautiful flowers often come from the most unlikely soil." The drive to the train station was quiet, both Luna and William lost in their own thoughts about the extraordinary day they had shared. As they settled into their private compartment on the overnight train to Boston, where they would catch their ship to Ireland, Luna finally allowed herself to fully absorb everything that had happened. "William," she said as the train began to move, "do you ever feel like we're living in some kind of impossible dream?" William pulled her close, marveling at how perfectly she fit against his side. "Every day since I met you. But if it's a dream, I never want to wake up." Luna smiled, remembering another night when she had felt like she was living in an impossible dream. The night she had knocked on Theodore's door and discovered that kindness still existed in the world. Now 10 years later, she was embarking on another adventure with the same faith that had carried her through that stormy evening. "Tell me about Isabella again," William said, sensing that Luna needed to talk about the family legacy she had just discovered. "I want to understand where my remarkable wife comes from." Luna settled more comfortably against his shoulder and began to speak about the great-great-grandmother she had never met, but whose influence had shaped her entire life. As the train carried them through the darkness toward their future, Luna realized that Isabella's story was really her story too, the story of a woman who had refused to let circumstances define her limits. She believed that every generation has the responsibility to build something better for the next, Luna said. "That's what I want us to do, William. I want us to create opportunities for other people, the way Theodore created opportunities for me. And the way Isabella created opportunities for you, even though she died decades before you were born," William added. "It's remarkable how love can reach across time like that." Luna nodded, thinking about Catherine's letter in the wedding dress that had waited for her for so many years. "I think that's what family really means. Not just the people who are alive at the same time as you, but all the people who contribute to making you who you are." The train rolled on through the night, carrying Luna and William toward Ireland and the next chapter of their extraordinary story. But Luna's thoughts kept drifting back to Millbrook, to Theodore preparing for bed in the house that had become her sanctuary, to Margaret discovering the joy of having family again, to all the people whose lives had somehow intersected with hers to create this perfect, impossible moment. 3 months later, Luna stood in the garden behind the new Blackwood Ashford Industries headquarters in Portland, watching Theodore direct the planting of rosebush that had been transplanted from Catherine's original garden. The building itself was everything they had dreamed of: modern manufacturing facilities, elegant retail spaces, and offices designed to accommodate the growing staff they were hiring. But it was the small details that made Luna happiest. Theodore's office had the same leather chair he had always favored, positioned so he could look out at the garden. Luna's office was filled with the books that had shaped her education and the photographs that told the story of her journey from orphan to entrepreneur. Most importantly, the building included the foundation offices where Luna had already begun implementing programs to help disadvantaged children access education and job training. The first scholarship recipients were starting college in the fall, and Luna had personally met with each of them to share her own story of overcoming obstacles. "The roses look happy in their new home," William observed, joining Luna on the garden path. He had just returned from a business trip to Boston, where he had been finalizing contracts with several major retailers who wanted to carry their textile products. "Everything looks happy here," Luna replied, taking his offered arm. "I think we made the right choice." William smiled, thinking about the decisions that had led them to this moment. He had ultimately chosen to work with Luna and Theodore rather than join his family's established business, a decision that had initially caused some tension with his parents, but had ultimately earned their respect. "Any word from the Ireland trip planning committee?" William asked. Luna laughed. "Margaret and Papa have it completely organized. They're more excited about visiting Isabella's birthplace than we are." The four of them were planning a trip to Ireland the following spring, where they hoped to learn more about the family history that had shaped Luna's inheritance. Margaret had been corresponding with distant relatives who still lived in the village where Isabella had been born, and their stories were adding rich details to Luna's understanding of her heritage. "Mrs. Ashford," a voice called from the building's back entrance. Luna turned to see her assistant, a bright young woman named Patricia, whom Luna was personally mentoring in business management. "The photographer from the magazine is here for the interview," Patricia announced. "They're setting up in your office," Luna sighed. The success of Blackwood Ashford Industries had attracted national attention, and several publications wanted to feature Luna's story as an example of American entrepreneurial spirit. While she appreciated the recognition, Luna was always careful to emphasize the role that family and community had played in her achievements. "Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes," Luna replied. "And make sure they understand that this story isn't about me alone. It's about all the people who contributed to making this success possible." As Patricia headed back inside, William squeezed Luna's hand. "Ready to inspire another generation of dreamers?" Luna looked around the garden one more time, taking in the roses that connected her new life to her old one, the building that represented dreams made manifest, and the man beside her who had chosen to build a future based on shared values rather than inherited expectations. "Always," she said, her voice filled with the same quiet confidence that had carried her through every challenge she had faced. "After all, someone else might be out there right now, thinking their situation is hopeless. If my story can show them that extraordinary things are possible, then every interview is worth it." As they walked back toward the building together, Luna reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought her to this moment. The frightened child who had knocked on Theodore's door in desperation had become a woman who could open doors for others. The orphan who had owned nothing but the ragged clothes on her back now wore a business suit tailored from fabric produced in her own factories. But more than any material success, Luna treasured the relationships that had made everything else possible. Theodore, who had shown her what unconditional love looked like. Margaret, who had connected her to a family history she had never known existed. William, who had chosen to love her not despite her past, but because of everything it had taught her. And Catherine, whose faith in an unknown future had made it all possible. Luna thought about the wedding dress that now hung carefully preserved in her closet at home, waiting for the daughter she and William hoped to have someday. When that day came, Luna would tell her daughter about the remarkable women who had worn the dress before her, and about the love that had carried each of them through their own challenges and triumphs. The story that had begun with an act of desperation on a stormy night had become a testament to the power of love, faith, and determination to transform any life, no matter how humble its beginnings. And as Luna prepared to share that story with yet another audience, she knew that somewhere out there, another child was about to discover that miracles really do happen. They just sometimes arrive disguised as ordinary human kindness. The little girl in rags had become a woman of substance, but she had never forgotten the lesson that had saved her life. Sometimes the most extraordinary destinies begin with the simple courage to knock on a stranger's door and ask for help. And sometimes, the answer to that knock changes not just one life, but creates ripples of love and opportunity that extend far beyond anything anyone could have imagined. In the end, Luna Ashford understood that she had inherited far more than money or property from the women who came before her. She had inherited their courage, their determination, and their faith that tomorrow could always be better than today. And now it was her turn to pass that inheritance on to the next generation, ensuring that the legacy of love would continue. For generations yet to come, 5 years after her wedding day, Luna Ashford stood in the nursery of her Portland home, gently rocking her 6-month-old daughter, Catherine Rose Ashford. The baby had her mother's dark hair and her father's blue eyes, but when she smiled, Luna could see echoes of all the women who had come before her. Sunlight streamed through the lace curtains that Luna had sewn herself, using techniques she had learned from watching Catherine's seamstress years ago. The nursery was decorated in soft yellows and greens, with hand-painted murals depicting scenes from fairy tales where brave princesses saved themselves. "Tell me the story again, Mama," came a small voice from the doorway. Luna turned to see 4-year-old James Theodore Ashford, named for both his grandfather Theodore and Luna's father James Mitchell. He was clutching a well-worn picture book and wearing the serious expression that appeared whenever he wanted to hear family stories. "Which story would you like, sweetheart?" Luna asked, though she already knew the answer. "The one about Grandmam. Isabella and the Magic Dress," James replied. Climbing into the rocking chair beside his mother, Luna smiled, remembering when she had first heard Isabella's story from Margaret. Now she was the keeper of those tales, responsible for passing them on to the next generation. "Once upon a time," Luna began, "there was a very brave young woman who came from Ireland, with nothing but hope in her heart and determination in her soul. As she told the story, Luna's mind wandered to the remarkable changes that had occurred since her wedding. Blackwood Ashford Industries had grown beyond their wildest dreams, with factories in 3 states and retail outlets across New England. But more importantly, the Luna Mitchell Foundation had helped over 200 children transition from foster care to independent lives, providing scholarships, job training, and mentorship programs. Theodore, now 68, but still energetic, as ever, had embraced his role as company president with enthusiasm. He spent his days traveling between their various facilities, ensuring that their commitment to fair labor practices and employee welfare remained the cornerstone of their operations. The workers adored him, often calling him Papa Blackwood, a title that never failed to make him smile. Margaret had surprised everyone by revealing a talent for financial management, taking over the foundation's accounting, and discovering she had inherited Isabella's head for numbers. She had moved to Portland to be closer to Luna's growing family and had become the children's beloved Aunt Maggie. William had proven himself an exceptional partner in both business and marriage. His Harvard education combined with Luna's practical experience had created a dynamic team that impressed even the most established textile manufacturers. But what Luna valued most was his unwavering support for her vision of business as a force for social good. And then what happened? James prompted, bringing Luna's attention back to the story. "Then Isabella met your great-great-great-grandfather Jonathan, and together they built something wonderful," Luna continued. "But the most magical part was the dress she commissioned, a dress that would bring luck and love to all the women in our family who wore it." Baby Catherine cooed softly in her arms, and Luna wondered if someday she would tell her daughter about the night a desperate child had knocked on Theodore's door, forever changing both their lives. A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. William appeared in the doorway, still wearing his business suit, but with his tie loosened and sleeves rolled up. He had just returned from a week-long trip to Boston, where he had been negotiating a major contract with Feline's department store. "How are my 3 favorite people?" he asked, crossing the room to kiss Luna's forehead and ruffle James's hair. "Papa!" James exclaimed, jumping up to hug his father. "Mama was telling me about Isabella and the magic dress." "Ah, the famous dress," William said with a smile. "Did she tell you that your mama looked like a princess when she wore it?" "She still looks like a princess," James declared with the absolute certainty of a 4-year-old. Luna laughed, though she caught William's eye and saw something serious in his expression. "James, why don't you go find Grandfather Theodore? I think he's in the garden and he promised to show you how to prune the roses." James scampered off eagerly, leaving William and Luna alone with the baby. William settled into the chair James had vacated, his expression thoughtful. "What is it?" Luna asked, recognizing the look that meant he had something important to discuss. "I had an interesting conversation in Boston," William began. "There's a textile company in North Carolina that's struggling financially. The owner approached me about a possible acquisition." Luna shifted Catherine to her shoulder, patting the baby's back gently. "That's not unusual. We get acquisition offers every month." "This one is different," William continued. "The company was started by a woman, a former mill worker who saved enough money to buy her own operation. She's been trying to implement fair labor practices, but she's competing against companies that exploit their workers. She's about to lose everything." Luna felt a familiar stirring of purpose. Throughout their marriage, she and William had discovered that their most rewarding business decisions were the ones that allowed them to help others while building their own success. "What's her name?" Luna asked. "Sarah Chun. She's a Chinese immigrant who came here with her family when she was 12. Her story reminded me very much of yours. Someone who refused to accept that circumstances should limit possibilities." Luna was quiet for a moment, considering the implications. Expanding into the South would be a significant undertaking, requiring substantial investment and management attention. But it would also allow them to demonstrate that ethical business practices could succeed even in regions where worker exploitation was considered normal. "I want to meet her," Luna said finally. William smiled, having expected that response. "I was hoping you'd say that. I've arranged for her to visit Portland next week." Their conversation was interrupted by voices from the garden below. Through the nursery window, they could see Theodore kneeling beside James, both of them focused intently on a rosebush. Theodore was explaining something with animated gestures, while James listened with the rapt attention he reserved for his grandfather's lessons. "He's going to spoil that boy completely," Luna observed with affection. "Just like he spoiled you," William replied. "And look how well that turned out." Luna stood and walked to the window, watching the scene in the garden. At 73, Theodore moved more slowly than he once had, but his enthusiasm for life remained undimmed. The garden he and James were tending was a faithful recreation of Catherine's original design, with additions that reflected Luna's own preferences and family traditions. "William," Luna said softly, "do you ever think about what our lives would have been like if I hadn't knocked on Papa's door that night?" William joined her at the window, wrapping his arms around her and the baby. "Sometimes. But then I remember something your father once told me, that some things are simply meant to be. You were meant to find your way to Theodore. We were meant to find each other. And this," he gestured toward the garden where their son was learning, life lessons from his grandfather, was meant to happen. Luna leaned back against William's chest, feeling the same sense of safety and belonging that had sustained her through every challenge. "Do you think Catherine really knew when she wrote that letter and saved the dress?" "I think Catherine understood something about love that most people never learn," William replied. "That true love doesn't end with death. It finds new ways to keep giving. Her love for Theodore led her to prepare for your arrival, even though she couldn't have known who you would be. Baby Catherine chose that moment to wake up completely, fixing her parents with the alert, curious gaze that reminded Luna so much of her own childhood intensity. The baby reached out with tiny fingers, as if trying to grasp the sunbeam streaming through the window. "She's going to be just like her mother," William observed, always reaching for something just beyond her grasp, and always managing to catch it, Luna added with a smile. As evening approached, the Ashford house filled with the familiar sounds of family life. Theodore arrived for dinner with dirt under his fingernails and stories about James's gardening progress. Margaret appeared with a pot of her famous Irish stew and updates about the Foundation's latest scholarship recipients. The dining room buzzed with conversation about business plans, family milestones, and dreams for the future. After dinner, as they all gathered in the living room for their traditional evening together, Luna found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The scared little girl who had once owned nothing now had wealth beyond her childhood imagination. But more importantly, she had something that no amount of money could buy: a family bound together by choice rather than obligation, love rather than duty. "Luna," Theodore said, interrupting her reverie, "I have something for you." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small wooden box, similar to the one that had contained Catherine's wedding dress, but much smaller. "What is it, Papa?" Luna asked, accepting the box with curiosity. "Open it and see," Theodore replied, his eyes twinkling with the same mischief she remembered from her childhood. Inside the box was a delicate gold locket, obviously antique but beautifully preserved. When Luna opened it, she found two miniature portraits, one of a young woman with dark hair and kind eyes, the other of a distinguished gentleman with a gentle smile. "These are your parents," Theodore said softly. "Margaret found them among your mother's effects. She thought you should have them." Luna stared at the portraits, seeing her own features reflected in her mother's face, and recognizing something of James's expressions in her father's smile. For the first time, she was looking at the people who had given her life, who had loved her in her earliest years before tragedy separated them forever. "They're beautiful," Luna whispered, tears streaming down her face. "And they would be so proud of the woman you've become," Margaret added, moving to sit beside Luna on the sofa. As Luna fastened the locket around her neck, she felt the final piece of her identity click into place. She was Luna Mitchell, daughter of James and Sarah. She was Luna Blackwood, adopted daughter of Theodore and spiritual daughter of Catherine. She was Luna Ashford, wife to William and mother to Catherine and James. But most of all, she was herself. A woman who had learned that love could triumph over any obstacle, and that the greatest inheritance was the wisdom to pass that love on to others. Later that night, after the children were asleep and the house had settled into peaceful quiet, Luna stood in her bedroom before the wardrobe where Catherine's wedding dress hung in protective covering. Someday, if Catherine Rose chose to wear it, the dress would continue its remarkable journey through another generation. If not, Luna would respect her daughter's decision and find other ways to honor the legacy of love that the dress represented. But for now, it was enough to know that the love which had preserved the dress, guided Luna to Theodore's door, and brought William into her life was still flowing through their family like an unstoppable river. That love had transformed a desperate orphan into a successful businesswoman, a frightened child into a confident mother, and a victim of circumstances into an agent of positive change in the world. As Luna prepared for bed, she thought about all the children who were even now benefiting from the Foundation's programs, all the workers whose lives were better because of their company's policies, and all the future generations who would inherit a world slightly improved by the choices made by one little girl who had refused to give up hope on a stormy October night. The story that had begun with desperation had become a testament to the transformative power of love, faith, and human kindness. And as Luna settled into sleep beside the man who had chosen to build a life with her, she knew that the most extraordinary chapter of her story was still being written in the laughter of her children, the wisdom of her father, the warmth of her family, and the endless possibilities that tomorrow would bring. The orphan girl in rags had indeed worn the wedding dress, but more importantly, she had learned to wear her own strength, kindness, and determination with the same grace that had carried generations of remarkable women before her. And in that grace, the true magic of the dress was revealed, not in the silk and lace themselves, but in the love that had preserved them and the faith that had ensured they would find their way to exactly the right person at exactly the right moment. Some stories end with happily ever after, but Luna's story was different. Hers was a happily ever continuing, a life dedicated to ensuring that love, once received, would never stop giving back to the world. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.